After 11, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the purpose of class today really is to go over the IRB application that everybody's filling out. I've gotten several in, and I appreciate the work that you have done in getting it in. It will probably take several versions working on it to get it to the point where you feel and I feel that it's something we can turn in to the Institutional Review Board here, and hopefully we can turn it in and get a response within 5-day time, something like that. But every time we do, I cannot predict ahead how it will be read, and it might mean that we need a little tweaking. Most of you will qualify for an exemption, so if they ask for more information, it won't be a big headache, I don't think. So I'm going to go over the application itself to show you what you need to put in. I have not yet posted this on the website, but it will be posted by this afternoon, so you can look at this as an example. Again, this is something I put together over the last 2 hours, probably the last hour, and so I'm not guaranteeing it's perfect, but it's something along the lines of what I'm looking for, and that what I believe the IRB board is looking for. And so I don't think you'll find it difficult. It's just to get the information. Looking at the application on part 1, they ask for a principal investigator. That's you. The department is the College of Education, Arts and Sciences and Nursing. You don't need to spell all that out. It's CEASN. What is your title? You are a student in the CMLD 355 class. If you want to put the name of the class on, that might be fine. But because I'll be turning in your applications all together, it'll be pretty clear which one it's for. Who's the sponsor? That's who they're going to go to ask questions about your submission, and that's me. So give my name and the relationship. So I have my name and CMLD 355 faculty. So that's the easy part. Title of the project. Give the project a title and make it one that reflects what you're doing. And it would be also helpful to have it reflect where you're doing it as well. I chose Boys and Girls Club, not that I was just trying to choose something that I could use for 2 examples, one in which I would be working with vulnerable populations and one in which I would not, or Joe would not, because he's the name I gave to this make-believe person. And so I said analysis of services provided by Boys and Girls Club. One way of doing that is the fact that you can go in and sort of look at the services without interviewing the children, without having any interaction with the children, in which case you're not working with vulnerable populations.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yes. So this first one has that in mind. I'm not going to work with vulnerable populations. I'm going to go in, and it says an analysis of the effectiveness of services provided by Boys and Girls Club by interviewing club administrators and reviewing published data related to each of the programs offered by Boys and Girls Clubs. Published data, the reason I said published data is because if it's published, it's already had any personal information removed. Boys and Girls Club also has to be responsible for making sure anything they publish does not reflect information where someone can pick out what individual said what. I am assuming by saying published data that would be fine by the IRB board. Who knows? But because if they have questions they'll ask me, I can also explain it because I'm going to be asking those questions of you as well. So, and it says request for over here at the bottom of the page, and we're requesting an exemption. That means they're not going to come back and they're not going to supervisors have already got enough information to know that it really doesn't look like you'll have anything to do with vulnerable populations. But to make sure, on the second page, they have all these questions. Does your research involve pregnant women, fetuses, or prisoners? I think in every case your answer is no. Does your research involve using survey or interview procedures with children? I marked no. Does your research involve the observation of children in settings where you, the investigator, will participate in activities with the children? No. And yet 2 and 3, those last two, it's possible that we have students in this class who will be interacting with students and or who will be interviewing students. Okay? And if that's the case, you'll be going a step further in preparing your application. If data are to be recorded by audio tape, I have suggested not doing that. There are times when it would be a good idea, but I don't think in your cases we're keeping it a simple assessment evaluation. We're not trying to make it a thorough evaluation. And so far, everybody that I've seen has said, no, we're not going to record this, or we're not going to tape it. Okay? If the subjects are to be identifiable either by name or through demographic data, is there a potential harm to the participants? From what I've heard from all of you, the answer to that is no. If the subjects are to be identified either by name or through demographic data, is there potential harm to the participants if the information is revealed? No. So if the information revealed or disclosed, and two different questions there, but the answer is no. Will the collection include sensitive data such as illegal activities, sexual orientation, sexual behavior, undesirable work behavior, that kind of thing? Don't know that any of you are asking those questions of the people that you're interviewing. Okay? And the 7 document records are originally labeled in such a manner that can be identified. I don't know that any of you are looking at sensitive information. If you are, we can talk about it. It doesn't preclude your doing so. It just means that they're going to look for a little bit more information before they approve it. So it says that under Part 1, they are looking for this application. They are also looking for a summary of the research protocol to include procedures needed to ensure participant anonymity. What I would like for you to do is to go back to what you submitted to me last week describing what you're doing, and just adapt that so it explains what you're going to be doing, what kind of information you're going to be gathering. I would put it with the application. Originally, I wasn't going to have you do that. Originally, I was just going to have you submit the application. But if you have that, it will strengthen the information they need to assure the fact that that your project really is eligible for an exemption. If you have your questionnaire or know what kind of questions you're going to be asking, jot that down. That would be helpful. If you are collecting information that's published, what kind of published documents are you going to be looking? Give a little bit more information there. I had not originally asked you to do this, and if it's going to be difficult, please get in touch with me, because I'm not sure how much information they need, but I don't think they need very much. And again, that document you prepared for me before, go back and tweak it so that it reflects what they're looking for. And if you go back and look at my feedback from last week, and that audio tape is still available, go back and listen to what I said about that to make sure that if I suggested a little bit more information is needed or needs to change, just make sure it's in there and go ahead and resubmit that with your application. And as I said, I'm not sure how much it's needed, but since you've already drafted it, let's include it. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry I'm late, but there was a terrible accident when I was on my way here, out in Laredo.
Ooh.
This guy was try to pass this car and he got too close behind it and like hit their back end and it sent them spinning and he
Yeah.
didn't stop.
And I'm sorry, it's upsetting. There have been a lot of accidents right around that area too. So take a few moments to let yourself decompress. And I know that when you're concerned about something like that, you're not going to be hearing what I say very much, and you might want to go back and re-listen to the tape later. So we are, just because you just did come in, we're looking at the Institutional Review Board application, and I'm going through what I'm looking for and what I think the board will be looking for in your answers. So this is just part one. Now what I've done is just go through part one, and if you are not working with vulnerable populations, and that's most of you, this is all that's needed. Pull it together, go back and, a title for your project on page one and a 1 or 2 sentence description of the purpose of your project. Do the ticks of, to indicate that you are not working with vulnerable populations or very sensitive information, if that's the case. In most of your cases, that's true. And then the additional materials they're looking for, I think if you include that description you prepared a week ago, I think that will be sufficient.
Is this what we're looking for, kind of?
Okay, what Scott is giving me is essentially an interview form. This is what you're going to be asking, and you're asking essentially, oh, you're doing a SWOT analysis with someone. Normally a SWOT analysis is done after information is gathered, but if what you want is an overview of what the administrators think are the strengths and weaknesses.
I was going to do that for the administration, the board, and the staff.
Okay.
And
And what I would do is,
what,
yeah, if you're interested, you could ask, what are you most proud of? And then ask probing questions. Are there other strengths that you think I should know about? What are you concerned about? Are there any threats to the long-term viability of your program? So, and then you have said that you are going to be asking the questions of, the other thing it would be is a little bit more information about who you'd be asking the questions of. But you're going along good lines here. Yeah.
administration, staff, and board of directors.
Okay.
No clients.
No clients, yes. But asking what people think are the strengths is helpful. To do a true SWOT analysis, it's after you've gathered information, and it might not be you're asking what are the strengths, but when you're analyzing what you've found, doing a quick SWOT analysis is helpful.
My question is, in order to fill out this IRB,
Yes.
we have to have already done that analysis, but we can't do the analysis without the IRB.
This is your plan. This is your plan. You've gathered enough information over the last month or so to know what kinds of questions you might ask. And when you give your interview form and say, these are the kinds of questions I'm going to be asking, what you need to feel confident is you're not going to deviate tremendously from it, but it's okay to ask follow-up questions, probing questions. It's okay, actually, I will say, to add another question or two that it's along the same lines, general nature of what you're asking in your interview. So this is where you're planning ahead, you're anticipating ahead what you'll be asking in your analysis, because you're doing a needs assessment. They call it research, but for the purpose of this class, it's a needs assessment. And you'll see what the difference is for those of you who are working with vulnerable populations. You'll see a little bit more about how they are seeing it as a research instrument, assuming that you have done background literature reviews and that kind of thing, which you are expected to do as you go in some of your classes, which you will be expected to do as you go into your senior seminar. And so, but you're not, you're just doing a simple needs assessment. And so what you have here will be sufficient if you do have, like the questionnaire, what you have planned to ask for questions. I would turn them into questions instead of just the SWOT, but just submit that, because what information you already have available, anything that will help clarify it to the review board would be helpful. But at this point, I know it's frustrating for most of you. I want to keep it as simple as possible. And if they want just a little bit more information, they'll let me know they need that little bit more information. In previous years, we haven't even had to give the survey instrument, except for the year when the students were doing a campus-wide survey, and they were asking questions of students as well as faculty and staff, and so they submitted their survey for approval. Yes, Leah?
It says Montana State University Northern, but what if we are doing?
Okay. Someplace else?
Oh, I see at the top of it, it says Montana State University Institutional Review.
Yes, because you are conducting the research as a part of a class project, it is a Northern research, and it's Northern that's responsible, even though you're looking at another agency. If the agency were conducting their own internal review, they would be subject to the approval of their board too. It could be, in most cases, most places are comfortable with you coming in and asking the kind of questions that fall under the category of being an exemption. They're really comfortable with your doing it, especially if you already have the approval of Northern. Some exceptions might be, for instance, Boys and Girls Club may be concerned, even though you're saying, I'm not going to be working with children, they may want to go through their authorities to make sure it's okay. In which case, this kind of application, what you're turning into Northern, you can give them the same information. And it's very clear, Scott's not going to be working with the vulnerable populations, but he's going to be checking with the supervisor to make sure this is okay. Probably no problem, as long as it's assured you're not going to be working with the populations that they're serving. You're not going to be revealing any sensitive information, because you're not going to even be looking at or have access to that sensitive information. Okay. So, David, in your case, there are sensitive populations involved, but you're not going there. So this should be fine.
And they already told me in advance that, because I had some questions, they said, there's some questions that we can't answer.
Yeah.
Frame your questions in a way that is not going to reveal, certain people or certain populations to.
And you'll see that these questions are geared to make sure you're not going to be asking any questions that would reveal any information, any sensitive information, any private information about anybody. Yeah. One of the things you might do also, and let me go on, I'm going to go back to, this was, I chose Boys and Girls Club because it's highly possible that somebody working with Boys and Girls Club would choose to say, but I want to hear what the children say, right? I want to know what the children say. And so,
Is the example on the D2L?
it will be by this afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize, I actually just threw it together this morning. I hope it doesn't look too thrown together. And so it may have problems. This is the very same application. This is for the expedited approval. It means that you are going to be working with vulnerable populations, but you're not going to be doing anything that is going to be of great concern. And so you're asking for it to be expedited. And you're going to include every bit of information, this is when you really need to have your surveys ready, because they need to approve it. Okay? So this is still Joe Gregory who's asking for the application. Because he's still in this class, so we're in the Department of Education, Arts and Sciences and Nursing, which we at Northern just called CEASN. You're still a student in this class. I am still the MSU-N sponsor. And the name of the project is the same. But in the purpose of the project, which describes what we're going to be doing, I added a sentence. This is an analysis of the effectiveness of services provided by Boys and Girls Club by interviewing club administrators and reviewing published data related to each of the programs offered by Boys and Girls Club. Actually, I might encourage you to only look at one program. Keep it simple. But that's what I say. In addition, Boys and Girls Club members will be asked to complete a brief questionnaire. The fact that Joe is approaching Boys and Girls Club to have a questionnaire completed by the children, now he's working directly with vulnerable populations. Okay. So, what does that mean? Well, the request is for expedited review instead of exemption. And going over the 7 questions they have, in this case, Joe is going to be doing research involving using a survey or interview procedures with children, and he marked yes. Simply by having one that says yes, that means that you're in a different category, Joe. So we have to go to part 2. The estimated duration of the total project. Joe's going to be interviewing administrators, going to be interviewing, I forget whether I said staff members. No, he's just said administrators, and he's going to be looking at published data, and he's going to be asking that an interview or a questionnaire be completed by the children. And I finally said, I thought about it, said, children need to be able to read. The instrument is going to be super simple because you're going to start with 8-year-olds that you don't expect to be able to read all that well. And, but 2 weeks from start to finish as far as gathering the data, right? So 3 administrators, I said 20 children, depends, of course, on the situation. 30 would make it even easier to make it anonymous. Sex of the subjects, male and female, equally representatives. Where will it be conducted? Boys and Girls Club. Source of the subjects. They're Boys and Girls Club members. Okay? There's no grant support for the project. There is no commercial support for the project. But in section 2, what is the background? And this is where, if you are asking for an expedited rather than an exempted, you need to give the background information. Some of you already prepared that background information, which is what you're going to be submitting with that. And as I said, having a little bit more information is helpful, but I just simply, this is a background. The project is being carried out in partial completion of the requirements of this course. It was chosen because of the student assessor's interest in learning about the effectiveness of after-school programs available to children aged 6 to 10. That says why this particular student, why Joe is interested in conducting the survey. Initial information gathered about Boys and Girls Clubs indicates that the Boys and Girls Club is a popular after-school service in the community. The proposed assessment is designed to measure the perceived impact of the Boys and Girls Club programming that the programming is having on 8 to 10-year-olds who participate. So Joe is simply explaining why he chose the project and what he's looking to find out. They did say at one point as I go down this, okay, the plan of study, and this is, they want the state of the hypothesis. Well, you're not going to have a hypothesis, but you may have a question. Question is, what is the impact of programs offered by Boys and Girls Club, to be more specific, on 8 to 10-year-olds? On the 8 to 10-year-olds participants, okay? Very simple, very straightforward. The risks. Working with vulnerable population, what is the risk to that vulnerable population? It is projected that children responding to the questionnaire at Boys and Girls Club will be at virtually no risk. Why? Because the questions are going to be generic in nature, because it will reveal only generalizable information about the programs in which they participate, that a staff member will actually be conducting it rather than the reviewer, that the responses, so the reviewer won't even know what child said what, okay? That the responses are going to be analyzed and reported in a manner that maintains anonymity. Well, if you don't know who the child is, you can still put the child at risk if there is an answer. One child said something that was written down that somebody, you know, who knows Boys and Girls Club would say, I know who that was. You know how that is. Okay, so raw data will stay, okay, but it'll be analyzed and reported in a way that maintains anonymity. And the raw data, that means the actual questionnaire forms as they're filled out, will stay on the Boys and Girls Club premises and will be destroyed upon completion of the study. You're saying, hey, this is not going to stick around. I just need information. This is how we're going to get the information. Populations, it has to do with children. Okay, and that's anyone under 18. Okay. Please describe any additional safeguard in place to protect these populations. I am assuming that, in fact, I'm informed that the parents who, when they register their children for Boys and Girls Club, give permission. And they do give some permissions, that one of them includes allowing their children to be used for advertising purposes and that kind of thing. But I don't know the extent of it. I didn't fill that out mostly because I was thinking, I want to wait a little bit. But you'll need to fill that out. Okay, describe additional safeguards. Well, a safeguard that's in place has already been stated, that it won't be the assessor conducting the interview, won't know anything about it. But another safeguard is that the parents will know about it ahead of time and will be giving their permission. Okay. Describe how the subject will be recruited, and that's what number 2 goes into. The children who participate in responding to the questionnaire will be those who attended the program on the dates specified a week in advance. The parents will be informed that their children will be asked to give their opinion related to the activities in which they have been participating. The parent permission slip is attached. So you need permission from the parents, and that means you need to have a copy of that permission slip. And I am of the understanding that there is, if the parents have already given a blanket permission, it's okay to survey my children, it's okay to get their opinions and report on it. Just give a copy of that permission where it's very clear that what you're doing falls under the scope of that permission. You don't have to have a signed permission slip from each parent, but just have it on file that you have received it for every child who's participating, and this is what the permission slip says. Okay. And if the already completed blanket permission does not seem to really cover it, if there might be cause for question, do another more explicit permission.
Did you want to see the permission slips?
If you are working with vulnerable populations, you need to have a copy of the permission slip as you file your institutional review board application. Okay. So this is the planning ahead. This is where Scott was saying, But this is stuff that's part of the actual study. Well, you need to plan ahead and anticipate what it will look like. So to do this, get those forms ready and add it to your application if you are working with vulnerable populations. Will subjects receive any compensation? In every case, I hope the answer is no. Okay. And it says also, will there be any fees attached to it? I hope the answer is no. Sensitive information. Will identifiable private or sensitive information be obtained about the subjects or other living individuals? Your intent is no, but it might happen. This is where I say, okay, it's a good idea with if you're working with 8 to 10-year-olds, partially for the simplicity of working with 8 to 10-year-olds. You might be answering yes or no questions, or choose what describes how you feel, and make sure if you're working with 8 to 10-year-olds, the language is the language of 8 to 10-year-olds. So you might really, if you're working with children that young, I would recommend working with the agency that will be doing it to make sure it is going to give you information you need. But also when they tick yes, no, it helps assure the fact that the children will not be identifiable. If you want to get a sense of what word would you use when thinking about this program, in which case it's a fill in the blank, probably it's not something that would identify the individual. But if it were that one child calls out something that's totally off the wall and everybody say, oh yeah, that's so and so, we know who that is, then what I recommend is, and you assure here, that you would simply generalize it as other, because other will not identify the individual involved. You know. Okay. So, part 5, conflict of interest form. You don't have it, but then they're asking you to say, okay, I certify that the information furnished concerning the procedures being taken for the protection of human subjects is correct, and I will seek and obtain prior approval for any modification of the project. Modification of the project does not mean necessarily, and notice you only have to sign this if you're working with vulnerable populations. You have more flexibility to tweak your instruments, ask follow-up questions if you're not working with vulnerable populations. But in this case, if you were thinking that you were going to have to modify it in any way that is measurable, you might change a few words that don't change the nature of the questions you ask. But if you change a few words and it's probing deeper, then you might ask for approval. But you're saying you're not going to change it, and then you sign it. And you sign that only, again, if you're working with vulnerable populations. So, and what they're asking for, notice previously they asked for the application form and a description of what you're going to be doing. At this point, they are specifically asking for the informed consent document, any recruitment notices. So if you're going to send something to the parents ahead of time, you would include that. Most likely, if you're sending something to the parents ahead of time, it would include, of course, the consent of the parents too. So it would be one document. Any instruments? And this is the point, if you're working with vulnerable populations, you really do need to make sure that you've developed your instrument well. In which case, and so I'm thinking of Sherry and Casey, it may take you a little bit longer to get all of this ready, but let me send in a preliminary of what you have together so we have it by Friday, and then work with me and keep in touch with me so we can make sure that your instruments are being developed in a way that I believe will be approved Also, I'm talking to Sherry and Casey and anybody else, if it applies to you, that you're going to need to work with your school board, not school board, you're going to need to work with your school. I asked downstairs, not the IRB board, but the dean who works with the IRB board all the time, and she said that your approvals from the principal will be fine. I know, Sherry, you don't have a principal, so it would need to come out of your superintendent's office. So, but an approval from the principal for you to do this is what you'll need from the school. Also, what the dean mentioned is that she, even though it doesn't say this specifically, a statement saying that you will, how you anticipate to using the information is something she'll look for. So, you know, you're gathering information, how will you use that information? And then what will you do with the raw data? And I recommend that you assure that you will, one, report in such a way that no individual can be identified, and explain what way that is, and then also that you will destroy the raw data upon completion of the project. It will help that, you know, if you need to carry that information home with you, and in both cases I don't think you have an office at the school, so you will need to carry the information home with you, but make it clear how the information you gather will stay in your possession and secure in your possession, so it won't be available for other people to get their, you know, to review and be able to figure it out, and the fact that you will destroy the raw data when you're finished. Any questions? Was this helpful? I've had a lot of questions, and I should have anticipated. I apologize. When I looked at the form initially, and based on previous information, I assumed simply that the information you had already gotten together would be easy to see and easy to fill out, and I should have recognized walking you through it would make a big difference, and I hope it does. If you are still not sure, it'll probably be a good idea for us to talk, so get in touch with me and we'll arrange a time for us to walk you through what you are submitting. The Dropbox is open. I went back and double checked and it's open. So if you have any trouble getting into that Dropbox, get a hold of me right away. It's open until tomorrow night.
Is that for the whole thing, or the page that goes with it, the overview?
What I'm looking for is the application itself.
So I need to scan that?
Scan in with a signature. If you're in this class, it's fine if you bring it to class.
Okay.
Yeah, I would appreciate your uploading it, but it won't have to have the signature if you're bringing the signed form to class. So you won't have to scan it in if you're coming to class on Friday. However, those of you who are off-site will need to scan it in so that I have your signed application. Yeah. Okay. Jonathan, you look a little bit, you have a question?
If we mark on the second page, do we follow the first two?
Yes. If, for the most of you, you'll only be completing the first 2 pages, actually onto the third. The third page is where your signature is. So for most of you, it'll simply be part 1 that goes until, you know, a quarter of the way down actually, the only thing that is required on the third page is your signature. So it's the first 2 pages and then your signature on the third page. That's all you need.
And what date do we want to use? Today is fine, or?
Today is fine. The day you complete it is fine. Anytime that when they go back and look at it, it predates you're actually carrying out your interviews or your surveys. Yeah.
So we just bring this to class Friday?
Yes, bring that to class Friday.
Upload it by tomorrow though, or?
If you could upload it, what it has is, I went back and looked at it, it has the due date being tomorrow, but it doesn't have that the Dropbox would close tomorrow. So it will stay open. What we're going to do on Friday, so this is why I really want it by Friday, is I'm going to look over what you've submitted. And if I perceive that some tweaking is needed, I can tell you right away, so that you can do whatever needs to be tweaked. Based on what we've talked about today, I trust that you're going to be really close to having it just fine. But if I want you to work on a little bit of explanation, a little bit more explanation here or there, you'll have the weekend to tweak that. And it won't be much, especially if you're not working with vulnerable populations. It won't be much. You've already drafted a description of your program. You already pretty much know what you're going to do and how you're going to go about it. And for the most part, you just need to explain that. So, any other questions? Okay. The advantage of, even if you're planning to turn it in by a form, the advantage of putting it into the Dropbox means I can access it and look at it again later. That's the only real advantage.
I have a question.
So, yes.
I was trying to revise, I can't remember exactly what it was, but for some reason I couldn't. What was it?
There are some boxes that may have closed by now. And no, I don't have a late drop box. So if you're trying to put something in, like you revised it and want to submit it, and you can't, just send me an email, and I will respond by either opening the box or telling you what I want you to do at that point.
Great.
Yeah.
I couldn't find the first 3 worksheets.
Okay, they should be. They are available. They might be under content. I thought I put them under the Dropbox, and if you couldn't find it, and if you still don't see it under the Dropbox by this afternoon, send me an email and I'll make sure it's attached to the Dropbox as well. I now have the worksheets for Chapter 3, and I have asked you to read Chapter 3. I'm going to upload those worksheets. However, I want you to work on this IRB form for right now. The worksheets are for next week. Okay. And they're pretty straightforward. You're going to look at them, you're going to say, but I already said this at other formats. So some of it is going to be, because this chapter says go back and think about, go back and review. And so go back and review and then clearly fill it in. And sometimes when you're doing assessments, sometimes when you're writing grants, sometimes when you're preparing plans, you have to repeat what you've said. And this will probably be just a good exercise in recognizing this is sometimes part of working with a bureaucracy, that you have to repeat. Actually, with grants, it's important because each section has different questions, and it doesn't rely on the fact that the person read a previous section. So in this case, I have the form. I think it's going to be pretty straightforward. If you run into concerns about the Chapter 3, one worksheet, Chapter 3, let's talk about that on Monday. So that's going to be our focus for next week.
Man, those one worksheets took me a long time, 1.5 to 2.2.
1.5 takes a long time. To do everything 1.5 asks you to do, they go into detail, and that's when you really needed to know what you were going to be doing, and it prepared you for that description of your project that you turned in previously. Okay, any other questions? All right, have a great weekend.